Good afternoon, everyone. Are you all right? Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you so much. Let me pay my respects to the office of the Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Linkabula. That's the Vice Chancellor of the University of South Africa. And I want to appreciate members from that office who are present with us here today in the name of Dr. Maureen Tong and Me Matwale next to her. And I also want to acknowledge Professor Velu Nkomo, the Executive Dean of the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs. He's over here with us. And let me also acknowledge all the colleagues, members of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation present here. All colleagues from the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs, students, members of staff of UNISA, and everyone else who's here. I want to also thank the organizers and everyone who ensured the manifestation or consummation and realization of this important event. I cannot overlook members of the media who might be present here today, in particular UNISA Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, I acknowledge all of you as I humble myself in appreciation of this wonderful opportunity to stand before you with the honor and privilege to direct this program, which means I'm your program director this afternoon. Because we are here on the occasion of reflecting on Africa Day and also the lecture that we had on Saturday. Let me say, Hujambo Africa, Hujambo South Africa, Hujambo Senegal. Professor Bathily, let me say, Naka Bechekbi. To those of you who don't know, I dabbled into Wolof, the language in Senegal, to say good afternoon, Professor Bathily. I want to thank you, Prof, for being with us this afternoon, and also appreciate and thank those who nominated you or asked you to deliver the 14th Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture on Saturday. I think that was a very, very wise decision, because I think, given the context, you are the most appropriate person who could have been nominated to deliver the lecture. Thank you, Prof. I can indeed confirm that my name is David Letswalo. And the only title I can accept is that of Mo Africa. So call me Mo Africa David Letswalo, then yeah, I will enjoy that. So I'm the program director, as I've indicated, for this afternoon. And in terms of my role in the university, I am the director responsible for academic support, student affairs, internationalization, and community engagement in the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs. When we are excited, we say it's the TM school. As I've already indicated and actually hinted, my role this afternoon, I want to emphasize, because that's where power is that of being a program director. Powerful. So everyone who's participating in this program, when I say 2 minutes, it's 2 minutes. So my assignment is really the simplest that one can ever execute in a university setting. That is to simply direct the program. And I guess this role is even simpler than being a moderator or a master of ceremonies. You know that, because as a master of ceremonies, you must master something. So I don't have to master anything. All I have to do is to direct the program. It's even simpler than being a facilitator. So ladies and gentlemen, a university is a space for freedom of expression and generally academic freedom. The space where intellectual exercise should be embraced. So today, this is one such platform for reflection on the 14th Africa Day lecture, which was delivered on Saturday, the 25th of May, 2024, by none other than Professor Bathily, on the theme, the new international scramble for Africa and the challenges of unity. I also take note that the context of the theme of the 2024 Africa Day, as pronounced by the African Union, is education fit for the 21st century. So for the purpose of today, this event and the discussions or the dialogue will revolve around the theme, young people reflecting on the lecture and offering youth-driven perspectives for Africa's renaissance. So in other words, we expect this conversation or this dialogue to be about what was proffered in the lecture on Saturday and nothing else. So this program will be in such a way that we're going to have Professor Vilunkomo coming in here to welcome everybody, and then we'll have a session where we'll be having two panelists presenting or reflecting or giving input on the lecture. Not any other lecture, the lecture that was delivered on Saturday. So I'm sure the panelists are aware of that. And who are these panelists? The first panelist is Mr. Bongi Nkosingwenya from the Human Sciences Research Council. And the second one is Ms. Karabo Mokhosi from Ikamva Youth. And this session of dialoguing will be moderated by none other than Ms. Asanda Luwat, who is the chairperson of the National Youth Development Agency, NYDA. So that is how we are going to be rolling out these discussions this afternoon. So after these reflections by the panelists, we'll have the honor and privilege of having Professor Abdullahi Bathily reflecting on those inputs. So what we'll do, we'll actually say, after the input from the panelists, you as this massive audience gathered here this afternoon, you'll have the opportunity to engage the panelists via the question and answer sort of session. So by the way, colleagues, we are streamed live across the country, across the continent, and across the globe, which means that we are talking to millions of people across the globe, because this is the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture, where we are reflecting on what Professor Abdullahi Bathily gave on Saturday with such vigor and splendor. Before I call on Professor Vilunkomo to welcome us officially at the University of South Africa, I would like to say that this whole event, ladies and gentlemen, is the affirmation of the alignment, the confluence, the convergence of events and phenomena in time and space. I'll come back to this point after Professor Vilunkomo's presentation. At this point, please join me in welcoming vigorously Professor Vilunkomo to the podium. Thank you.
I was not aware that you are giving me such a difficult task. But in any case, when you are given a difficult task, you go for it. You don't hesitate. May I ask all of us to rise, because I would like us to have a moment of silence in remembrance of what is going on in the Gaza Strip, and in particular the youth who are faced with a situation which is impossible. Can we please rise? Thank you very much. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor, Principal of the University of South Africa, as well as the Chair of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, I'd like to welcome you all to this important occasion. Usually we like to look at numbers. We want thousands and thousands of people to attend. For me, what is important is the attendance of people who have a keen interest in the subject matter to be discussed. So don't worry that the numbers are not hundreds of people, but focus on the substance which is going to come out of this conversation. It's not always multitudes that change the world, but it's what we used to call in our good days, Professor Bathily, the vanguard. You must always have a vanguard. And if you don't have a vanguard, you don't know where you're going. So I welcome you to the University of South Africa. This institution, as you all know, has distinguished itself in producing some of the best graduates in the country, in the continent, and the world. So it is no accident that the Thabo Mbeki Foundation has decided to work with this illustrious institution of higher learning. And we do believe that the Thabo Mbeki Foundation will continue to add value to the work of the University of South Africa and vice versa. Professor Bathily, you are welcome to our university. You are also welcomed because of your intellectual ability and your way of articulating very serious matters that confront our continent. You don't simplify them, you're not simplistic, but you demonstrate the complexities that face this continent. And I'm sure if the Vice Chancellor was here, she would have confirmed that you are one of the best intellectuals in this continent to articulate the condition of the continent. I want to thank President Mbeki for highly recommending you, Professor Ambassador Bathily. It took months to actually get a name to say this is the person who's going to deliver this year's Africa Day lecture. And I must say the University of South Africa responded to the clarion call by President Mbeki by actually making it possible that the collaboration works well. You are a scholar, we must not forget that. You are a researcher, a political leader of substance, a deep thinker, and a visionary. that's what you are. In the different lectures you have given at the roundtable discussion held on Friday, it was quite clear that when you hold a roundtable discussion, you must come up with solutions or a way forward. You don't just come to a roundtable discussion and it's all talk and talk and talk. We have set a research agenda which within the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs we shall pursue. We will be discussing that agenda which came out of the roundtable discussion. You have also underscored at the lecture the significance of education. Education is the ultimate liberator. Politics is merely a facilitator. You talked about inventions, discoveries, and it was quite clear that this continent cannot liberate itself if it cannot address those issues. Education is an important project to develop, shape, and prepare for the future of this continent. And if we don't do it, nobody's going to do it for us. We have to do it. And the young people, you are actually challenged to be in the forefront of shaping the future of this continent. As Professor Bathily said, our generation is that generation which was about liberation. The new generation, or the generation of today and future generations, must be talking about how we take the steps which were created to the next level of upward climbing. If you do not invest in the current and the future generations, there's actually no future. Institutions of higher learning, parents, private sector, public sector, they must all invest in young people in this continent. The university and the Thabo Mbeki Foundation are shaping the future of Africa with the youth participating. And hence, we're excited that you are participating. You are going to be the facilitator, young lady. We respect you, we salute you, we pay homage to you. And if you had not agreed to participate, you would have been very disappointed. I've said a lot. Without any further ado, I want to hand over to the Master of Ceremonies or the Project Manager.
Thank you, Prof. Nkomo, for graduating me into a Master of Ceremonies and a manager, you said, Project Manager. So I welcome that with both hands. So earlier on I talked about the alignment of this project, as a confluence and alignment of phenomena and events, in space and time, time and space. I'll just give a few remarks. One, in 2 days' time, this country is going on elections. And the elections which were, founded on the elections that were heralded in 1994, the 27th of April, 1994. Okay? Yeah, I agree. So, then, how did that freedom or the elections come about? Those elections came about, amongst others, by the ties that bind South Africa and Senegal. In 1987, President Mbeki, leading the African National Congress, engaged the representatives of business in South Africa, in Dakar, Senegal. Senegal, underlined that, in 1987. And those talks, known as the Dakar talks, led to 1994, 27 April. In 1972, on the 27th of April, because we are now talking about Africa Day, Kwame Nkrumah passed on. There is an important date around Kwame Nkrumah on the 27th of April 1972. That alignment. But now we're talking about the African University, shaping futures in the service of humanity, which is the University of South Africa, the African University, co-hosting the Africa Day lecture. So in 1906, a young man, now that we're talking about the youth, a very, very brilliant man, young man, Pixley Sakaseme, gave a very, very important speech in the US, where he was talking about the regeneration of Africa, the renewal of Africa. And later on, another Senegalese, Cheikh Anta Diop, talked about the African Renaissance. In 1996, former President Mbeki talked about being an African and bringing in the issue of African Renaissance. And today, we have a very, very renowned, reputable scholar from Senegal, Professor Abdoulaye Bathily, having given the 14th Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture on Saturday. That is the confluence and alignment that I'm talking about. So without wasting any time, let me call on our moderator for today, Ms. Asanda Luwat, who's the chairperson of the NYDA, to come and take us forward. I'm sure that she will do a very, very good job in terms of saving time. And I'm going to ask Professor Velunkomo to join me down there. I'm not degrading you, Prof. So, over to you. I'll come back later.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Molweni ma Afrika, ninjani. Program director, when I was requested to moderate today's reflections on Africa Day, I was under the impression that given the fact that we were commemorating such a historic day, that we would all be draped in our proudly African ensembles, but to my surprise, it seems like it is just myself and Prof who received that particular memo. But nonetheless, allow me to greet everyone and just indicate just how amazing everyone is looking this afternoon. Can we give yourselves a round of applause? And I'll tell you why. Now, firstly, it's important to acknowledge the warm bodies that are present this afternoon, precisely because it is a conscious young person who ought to form part of these strategic and very important discussions. In another organization that we are part of, I'm sure Prof. Vilnkomo was once a part of that organization, before our liberation in South Africa particularly. But we would always lament the fact that we must never underestimate spaces of this nature, because in that particular organization, it's spaces of this nature that would ultimately form the policy directions rather of what would become a governing party that is currently a governing party 30 years into democracy. And so what we want to do with today's discussions is, having received, listened, and given ourselves time to reflect on the lecture that was presented by Prof. Bathily over the weekend, it's important for us to do so, having received the marching lines or the marching orders of what a conscious young person 30 years into our democracy ought to be engulfed with. Now, before that, of course, allow me to observe protocol. Allow me to acknowledge, of course, the program director, Mr. David Letswalo. Allow me to also acknowledge Prof. Vilnkomo, Prof. David Melo, and last but obviously not least, Prof. Abdullah Bathily, whom, as we know, was the keynote address at the 14th annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture. Now allow me then to also just extend our heartfelt greetings to the former president, President Thabo Mbeki, who, as we are aware, is recuperating at home. On behalf of young people, we wish the son of Omgav a speedy and steadfast recovery. Now, it's important that this particular reflection happens a day before something that was quite an epoch moment in the history of South Africa, Prof. Now, just briefly reflecting, on the 26th of May, 76 years ago, apartheid became the official policy of this country through the defeat of Jan Smuts by the Verenigde Nasionale Party, what we know would have been the National Party that was led by D.F. Malan. Now, this heightened as well as the legalized racial supremacy that was accompanied by brutality, oppression, super exploitation, as well as the dehumanization of Africans in particular, but blacks in general in our native land became legislated. Now, I highlight the above significant epoch in our history on the eve of what will be characterized as one of the most difficult elections in our democratic dispensation. Now, the significance of the elections and the need for democracy to prevail and emerge victorious takes on a greater significance, as it must proceed to ensure that our country never allows itself to go back to such abhorrent and inhumane policies such as that of apartheid. Now, the path to the full realization of national democracy across all sectors of our economy and all sections and all spheres of society remains the most notable and the most legitimate cause, as led by the African National Congress, that former president himself has been a member of and boasts just over 68 years of membership, also of membership and unbroken service, is one that we cannot underestimate. Now, I raise the above on the backdrop of what the program director alluded to, what would have been the 14th annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture that did take place, as we are aware, on the 25th of May in Midrand. Now, this year, the theme of the lecture was as follows: the new international scramble for Africa and the challenges of unity. Now, as we know, the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture is an annual event that is organized by the Thabo Mbeki Foundation as well as the University of South Africa to commemorate Africa Day, set aside to commemorate the founding of the Organization of African Unity on the 25th of May in 1963 in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Now, I'd like to borrow, Program Director, from the words of the chairperson of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Honorable Geraldine Fraser Muleketi, when setting the scene on Saturday, made the following remarks, and I quote, "The mission of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation is rooted in a vision of the African Renaissance, a concept which is passionately championed by our patron Thabo Mbeki and Mam Zanele Mbeki, pardon me," close quote. She further said, "We see the celebration of this day as an opportunity to serve as a platform to amplify the ideals of the African Renaissance, and for us as a foundation, it is an important occasion for engagement and dialogue. It brings together a diverse array of stakeholders, including government leaders, civil society organizations, academic institutions, business entities, and the broader African community," close quote. Now, the patron of the foundation himself made the following introductory remarks when he said, and I quote, "The theme for this lecture is as timely as it is important. The world is undergoing profound geopolitical shifts towards multipolarity. On our own continent, we have witnessed a resurgence of sustained conflicts across a number of countries. This, compounded by protracted challenges of leadership and incapacity of our multilateral institutions, underscores the urgency and relevance of this discussion, led by an eminent African Pan-Africanist and thought leader himself," close quote. Now, the above succinctly captures why we have gathered here as young people in general, but society at large in particular. To shape, to recreate, and possibly influence the discourse on what former President Mbeki correctly characterized, and to give a youth lens and a youth focus to the entire discussions. Now, there's a Marxist quote that says, "Better fewer, but better." So my message really is that let's not be deterred by the warm bodies in front of us this afternoon. Prof, we have many more that are following the discussions online. Given the fact that you are engaging with young people, we would have ensured that we are actively present through our online platforms. UNISA is currently streaming today's discussions, but we also would want to encourage everyone, either on the online platform as well as seated here physically, to follow the hashtag Mbeki Africa Day Lecture. I'll repeat, the hashtag is Mbeki Africa Day Lecture. Now, with that, allow me then to introduce our panel members, whom, as I had initially started, were eagerly listening in on the keynote address that was delivered by the Prof over the weekend. And so today's discussion will really begin to dissect and make this particular gathering more relevant for young people, because as an agency that I've been trusted to leading, we often say that in every initiative that we are doing, we are to ensure that we leave no young person behind. And so today's discussion is precisely to inculcate that particular motto, is that as we engage in what will be a fruitful and a productive discussion, that we will leave no young person behind. So with that then, allow me to invite on stage our two panel members who will be joining the Prof and myself, of course. Firstly, we'll be joined by Bonginkosi Ngwenya, who is from the Human Resource Research Council, HSRC, as well as Ms. Karabo Mkhosi, who is from Inkamva Youth. Whew, my eyesight is not as young as I am. Oh yes, she's from Inkamva Youth Branch, and she is the Inkamva Youth, and she is the branch manager. So with that, allow me then to give our panel members a warm welcome as they ascend to the podium. Testing. All right. Thank you once again to our panel members who have graciously agreed to forming part of this particular and important discussion. Now, I'll start with Ms. Karabo to just briefly take us through what it is your organization does, particularly for young people in this country, before we delve into the crust of why we are here today, which is to reflect on the debate, on the keynote address that was delivered over the weekend. So allow me then to hand over to Karabo, who will take us through, and then the same, we'll just get a sense of what it is the HSRC does, and then we'll come back to a second round of questions. So I'll start on my right. Thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As they have mentioned, my name is Karabo Mokhosi, and I'm from a province called Limpopo, so Thobela. So Ikamva Youth has been in existence for 21 years, and our mandate on a daily basis is to work with young people who are from disadvantaged backgrounds. So we grant them opportunities through educational streams so that they may be able to create livelihoods, and also when doing so, we also encourage them not only to do that for themselves, but by also pulling others with them. So we are an after-school program where we offer after-school programs as in tutoring, and then that is the in-school program. We also have what we call our out-school programs, where we mainly focus on things such as skills development programs, mainly short courses. In everything that we are doing and are offering, everything is free. We do not charge a cent. Because as I've mentioned, in most cases, we are working with young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we give her a round of applause? All right, Mr. Boinkosi, over to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Boinkosi Gwenya, and I'm from Soweto, so I don't know which language to greet, but I'll just say Tada. So I'm from the Human Sciences Research Council, and today I'm standing in for my boss, Dr. Panelist, who had to rush to a meeting that she was called to immediately. So I'm from the Human Sciences Research Council, as I said, and we exist to undertake research in the human sciences, in the social sciences space, as well as humanities. And through the work that we have done, the HSRC has served the country and the continent for 50 years now. And it has been known to be an institution that fosters youth involvement and youth engagement, especially in informing policy. And this can be looked back into last year, December, when the institution saw the youngest team of graduates leading an election observation mission in the DRC, which continues to echo the intention of the institution to foster youth development, but also to assist in the issues that are facing the country, such as unemployment, but also to make sure that the voice of young people is reflected in policies that the country and the continent at large puts forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you to our panel members for those brief introductory remarks. Now, we'll delve straight into the lecture itself. Now, Prof. Bathily would have really taken us through a journey of history that is not unique to any particular African country, broadly speaking, when he really would have mentioned the fact that historians would have used the term scramble to refer to the fierce competition amongst your European countries to conquer and colonize various African states. Now, we've seen then the remnants of a colonized South Africa, the remnants and the ramifications of that centuries later, and how they continue reproducing themselves in the current day society, where young people particularly bear the brunt of the triple challenges of unemployment, of poverty, and inequality. So I think briefly, and I'll start with yourself. Can you just briefly take us through what have been your experiences of young people on the ground, being alive and living through the ramifications of a history that South Africa particularly has? And what would your message be to a young person who is despondent, given the material conditions that they find themselves in ultimately?
I think this is quite interesting because I'm actually turning 30 this year. So it's the 30 years.
So basically, you're a Dinswalo. When President Ramaphosa spoke about a Dinswalo who was born in 1994, he had you in mind, Karabo.
Most definitely. So I think I'll speak about this based on some of my personal experiences, but also the overall of young people and on my day-to-day challenges that I would see. So I think as a young person, one, being black, two, being a female, it's one of those things where I look back and I say, I think first and foremost, before getting to this, I must highlight this. For me, this is quite important. We are grateful for what happened in the past, and we are so grateful for the liberation. But with that, there are certain things that have taken place that are still affecting us today as young people. And I feel, unfortunately, we feel like we are bearing the crosses of those decisions. And that is why I started off by saying we are so grateful for the liberation. We have seen the opportunities it has granted us. I mean, like I said, to be a young black female sitting here, that is something else. But to still come back to the fact that as a young person working with young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, we are still facing some of those same difficulties. The lack of proper learning institutions in these black communities, the lack of opportunities that our young black people or young Africans are still facing. There's a huge difference, I always say this, between a young boy who is from Mamelodi than a young boy who is from Pretoria East. You'll be amazed at the fact that a 16-year-old from Mamelodi can't even use a computer at this day and age, and that's a problem. You'll be amazed at the fact that young boys, I think 2 days back, I was on my way to work and I found young people along the streets and I asked them, why you're not in school? And one of the answers I got was, there's no water at school in the black community. So those are some of the challenges that we are still facing till this day. But it does not mean that we are saying we do not see and appreciate what has happened and what we have been given. But we are saying there is still some struggles that we are facing today, that we still faced, I believe, or they still faced. I wasn't just born. They still faced back in those days. And for me, that is why it's a bit of a hot and cold type of thing. Usually when I answer that question, I don't really know what to say. Because if I come off as saying, but we're still facing those challenges, we might come off as but you're ungrateful. But the reality is, it is really not nice to still face the same challenges that our grandfathers and our grandmothers were facing today. So I will repeat, we are grateful, but we are still bearing the crosses of some of those decisions which were made. And I think we are just trying to understand how can we actually work around those things, because they're still affecting us till this day. So I think I can just close it off for now for there.
Perhaps then let me come in from a similar question, but from a more research or I would say an empirical point to say the HSRC would have done extensive work over the years in producing documents, policy papers and the likes on broadly the state of our country, but would have also touched on the lived reality of a young person now versus that of a young person 30 years ago. So maybe can you just take us through that so that we're then able just to get an appreciation of where we are. Thanks.
So I think there has been improvement, but per personally, I think there should never be a point where we shy away from saying, in all the successes that have happened, they've not been the standard but an exception. And this is on the case where you would see, even with the delivery of opportunities and services, they would mostly be for, a certain, geographs. For example, in the country, we still, face the largest technological divide. And that, I think, was underscored during the time of COVID-19, where in still the same, democratic and equal society that we call our country, some students continued with their academic journeys, but those in public schools and in government schools, they are stopped. So that continues to show you not a side of standard, but a side of exception. However, then you look again on the issue and the narrative that will be placed out there that the youth is despondent, the youth is not engaged in politics. I usually refuse to agree on that point because young people are speaking. The question is, are they listening? On the 21st of December, the DRC went on elections. So I happened to be there, forming part of the team with the HSRC observing the elections. And large amounts of the voters that were there were young people. So young people are not despondent. The polling stations, were preempted supposed to open at 5 a.m. Young people were there from 5 a.m. and some polling stations did not open the whole day. And I'm saying this because I was there physically and we would rotate along all the stations and you would see young people continuously embedding themselves to say, no, we will wait, the station will open. You go to look at countries like Senegal, when the previous president attempted to postpone the elections indefinitely. But you saw young people again there, standing and making sure that those elections are supposed to take place. However, you look at cases like South Sudan, where those young people are born in trauma, and most of them are most likely to die in trauma. That shows you that even in the case of equality and democracy, regionally and even continentally, it is not a standard but an exception.
Yeah, no, I think that's that. So I wanted to perhaps bring in the Prof, given his vast experience in government. He would have served as former Minister of Energy and Hydraulics, as well as, Senior Minister in the Office of the President in charge of African Affairs. He also served as, or rather his experience as a Vice Speaker of the National Assembly really speaks to his vast and knowledgeable experience across the various spheres of government. Just to say that, from your experience, Prof, what have you identified would be a key challenge to the participation of young people in governance or the government processes, either in Senegal or just broadly speaking? What in your view, what is limiting young people from being able to meaningfully participate in the platforms that have been presented? Can we hand over the mic?
Thank you very much. Well, I would like, first of all, to thank you, the moderator, and the members of the panel. I think these are very important issues. Young people everywhere are those who make changes happen in society. I'm today 79, but I have been also a young person. Liberties, freedoms are not granted should not take them as something which will be granted to us spontaneously. Societies in histories are platforms of competition, class struggles over different interests. When I take the example of Senegal, I know a little better. Some 60 years ago, in 67, 1967, 68, we as students, we decide that we have to fight for the change in the university. Dakar University was the 19th university of France. Almost 10 years after independence, it still remained that in 68. We said, we as students, organization, we decide that we have to change this. We want a university for the people of Africa. We do not want the University of Dakar to remain the 19th French university. We want the university to address the issues of Senegal as an independent country, as a people who aspire to freedom, economic development, social equality, and cultural independence. When I was part of the student leadership then, we staged demonstrations to ask the government to do something about this. There was, of course, a particular issue about scholarship. The government decided that, of course, they had to cut on the scholarship of the students, saying that the students are privileged with respect to the other segment of society. They said that the University of Dakar cannot be actually compared to other universities in France, and therefore we have really to maintain the international standing of the university. What do they mean by what? If we engage on transforming the university curriculum, it would mean that the University of Dakar would no longer be accepted as an international university, but a university, what you used to call here, Bush College. We said, for us, what is important is for the university to respond to the demands of our society, rather than to respond to the demands of the so-called international society or French society. We went on strike. President Senghor, whom you know, who is also a university graduate, he had the highest diploma in the French system. He believed only in the French system. Of course, we went on strike. By the way, on 29th of May, 1968, we went on strike. Called the police. At that time, we were 3,000 students at the University of Dakar. We were all put in the lorries and transported to military barracks. These have stirred the resentment workers, and the general strike was called by the trade union movement. So an alliance between the students and the trade union movement created a vast social movement in the country, throughout the country. The general strike was called, the country was at standstill, and we nearly had a military coup d'etat because the government has lost control of the situation in the country. And it is, to cut short a long story, it is through this movement of the 1968 student movement, social movement, that our democratic process started. Because during the first years of independence, Senegal had a one-party system. They believe that one-party system is the best. One leader, one party, one ideology. This is what used to be said. We said no. We went many flowers to blossom. No more one-party system. We need democracy, especially when that one-party system did not produce what we were aspiring for. When that one-party system was linked to the new colonial process. You say, we had the national anthem, we have the flag, but we were not independent. So, we as students, we belong to underground political parties of the left. So we require, but now we should have a political system, an open political system. This is how our democratic process started. I wrote a book on this, which I called the student revolt in Dakar and the beginning of a democratic process. Because I was part of that process as a student leader. I explained how the movement started and over the last 50 years, how we have reached this level. So much so, Senegal is among the few big countries in Africa where we didn't have a military takeover. We had a democratic process. Well, we have a lot to say about ups and downs about our democratic process. But up until now, the young people from different generations over the last 60 years have been at the forefront for the democratic process until this year, when Macky Sall, president, who is born after independence, we were expecting that he will promote change, bring more democracy, but it turns out that he was worse than the other presidents we had before. And as you said rightly, he decided to postpone the elections to prevent one candidate from being young people, I mean, who represented one movement from the young people to be a candidate. So there was a huge demonstration, huge demonstrations throughout the country. And of course, people said no, we should have the opportunity to have those elections, plural elections. And he eventually was defeated. His party was defeated. And we have now a new dispensation through this new party which has sprung up just 6 or 5 years ago. And now we have a president of 44 years old. You know? Well, lot of, hope, but transformation will take place. So, I don't want to go into all the details, but I think young people should take their responsibility, take their moral as well as their political responsibility at all times, because they are the main factors of change. However, I think what is important is the right kind of principles the young people should. Because sometimes we have seen young people being engaged in fascist organizations, conservative organizations, which look back to the future rather than looking forward. So young people who are committed on a progressive platform to improve society, to create the conditions for more freedom, more social equality, political transformation for the benefit of all. This is what is needed. And I think it is important for young people to be really involved in the political process in a positive way, rather than, because we have seen in history, but sometimes young people are mobilized for the wrong principles. When you look at the Mussolini's, the Adolf Hitler's, and others in many countries in history, unfortunately, young people sometimes are mobilized for causes which are against their own interests, unfortunately. This happens sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think this is the issue.
Yeah.
I've seen this in different countries, and I think today the question, for instance, when we look at the scramble for Africa, is for young people not to be mobilized along the principles of a liberal economy, but to be mobilized for economic independence for us, to be mobilized to cut off the ties with those who have enslaved the Africans, those who have captured our economy, to maintain us as providers of raw materials, those who have captured us to remain as providers of economic or trade relations, to maintain the kind of trade relations we had since the beginning of the colonial system or the apartheid system. Because sometimes when political campaigns started, people come up with a lot of propaganda discourse. But when you look at it very closely, you have really to try to see beyond those propaganda discourse what is really at stake. And today I think it is important for young people to be mobilized for progressive ideas. Of course we have to learn from our mistakes. Of course we have to learn from our errors. Of course we have to acknowledge the fact that some of our leaders have failed us. But we should not throw the baby with the bathwater. Today what is at stake is to learn from our mistakes, to look at those leaders who have failed us, but to stick to the progressive ideas, to improve upon them. This will be the only way for Africa, at national level and at unity level, to lift this continent from poverty dependency so that Africa can become an actor, a positive actor in the current world order. We should not follow those who want us to follow the current path of our history. We have to turn around the situation so that the coming generation will be proud of having contributed to the true independence of the continent. This is what I would like to throw on the table.
Yeah. Sure. No, I think, yeah. There's so much that Prof was saying, and I think with every word or every sentence would have sparked something else, in my thought process as you were responding, Prof. But I think, just to maybe build off from where you left off, the need for young people to be mobilized. Now, our history is riddled with many instances of young people that have displayed the ability to be mobilized. Now, one of the striking features of the African polity, particularly of what we coin former liberation movements, was the ability of youth formations to actively engage against a particular struggle. Now, we would have seen your SWAPO in Angola, your AMPLA, SWAPO, Namibia, Frelimo, as well as, the ANC Youth League in South Africa, or in the context of South Africa. And, the struggle that the founding members of the ANC Youth League, your Anton Limbetes, would have fought for. Now, one thing that I would see is probably a link between all these liberation movements, particularly the youth formations, was the ability of young people to be organized, right? And I think we can say that over the years, that particular aspect of being organized has withered away. Now, I just wanted to perhaps engage you on what ought to be a young person, or how can young people begin a process of being organized? Because, and I'll just make reference briefly, the ANC Youth League would have really been in a state of lull over the years after the disbandment of the previous president, who then would have opened a new political party. But over the years, or rather in recent history, as recent as last year, the Youth League was, or the autonomy of the ANC Youth League was then claimed back to its rightful owners, which is young people. Now, one of the policies that the Youth League is advocating for is the idea of the beneficiation of raw materials, and how there ought to be export quotas on the raw materials that leave our land, leave South Africa. They then get to be modified, manufactured, and brought back into the country. And in that, we are losing there's an entire value chain that we are losing, and young people can be active participants in that particular value chain. If we're looking at agriculture, there's an entire value chain of agro-processing, from plowing a particular vegetable to processing it into a secondary product, to ultimately exporting it to the necessary markets. But I think the ability then of young people not being able to be organized has really allowed for the absence, what we call a lacuna of that youth voice, to actively then champion the interests of young people, right? So I would really just want to get your thought process on how young people can be organized, or go back to, the historic mission of being able to be organized, so that wherever we are, irrespective of political lines, young people should be singing the same tune in our respective corridors of power. If I'm at the NYDA and my task is to lobby the various departments, I can engage the Department of Mineral Energies and Resources to say that this is a policy position of young people. But I think the absence then of us being able to be organized has really diluted that voice, because now we're speaking many different things in our many respective corners, and so our presence isn't really felt. So I would just really just gauge you on how do young people become better organized so that we're able then to fine-tune or identify our generational mission and be able to champion it in whichever corners and corridors of power we might find ourselves in.
Well, this is supposed to be a dialogue, therefore I don't want it to be a one-way discussion. All I can say is that what Frantz Fanon said in his Breaking of the Earth, that every generation has to discover its mission, assume it or betray it. I think this is right. Of course, there are different ways and forms to assume one's mission, historically. Today, as student, for instance, it is important to struggle for an education system which is geared to creating the conditions for the economy to be transformed. For instance, we have all over the continent, we have millions of young people who come to the labor market every year, whether it's in South Africa or East Africa, any country. But we will find that today the education system cannot perform well if at the same time there is no transformation of the economy. So there are two double ways. Education can improve on the economy and reverse also can happen. For instance, in the sector of agricultural sector, how to bring young people into it. We should have an adequate education system which will allow young people to enter into this agricultural sector and other sector of the economy, including the numeric sector, etc. But also in the sector of the society, societal transformation, civil society, the struggle for human rights, for freedom. So there are different ways in which young people can be involved. But I think what is important to say, young people should not sit idle. They should commit themselves at all times to societal transformation, to political transformation for the good of the majority of the people. Just to say, but I also would like to listen to you.
Yeah. All right. No, thank you very much, Prof, once again. I must apologize, when we are in the presence of such wealth of wisdom, you would tend to monopolize it, but we are not engaging in a dialogue, but rather a discussion. And so we want to throw it back to the audience, just to get an indication from yourselves. What are your thoughts? What are your reflections on the lecture that was made over the past weekend? And really, how do we place young people at the focal point of, and I'll bring it back to South Africa, the focal point of what will be one of the most greatly challenged elections in our democracy. Where do we place young people? What are the conversations we should be having? So I'm not too sure if we have any hands on the audience. Do we have any questions? Okay. Do we have roving mics? All right. So we'll start with the gentleman here in front. And then colleagues will forgive me, the podium is blocking my view, but I had noted the lady in the gray dress will be our second speaker. Can we just request, introduce yourself, briefly, and then your question will follow. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. Firstly, I want to introduce myself. This is Prof. Chi from UNISA. So I like your question, and thanks for Prof to give us very good idea. So for me, because next month is Youth Month, so I also would like to share some comments about your question just asked, because this one is very important for our youth, and today there are lots of youth here. For us, for me, compared with Prof, I'm not that old, but I'm still old. I'm not yet youth. But for us, we should transfer our know-how, our skill, our knowledge to our youth, because as Prof mentioned, youth is the future of the continent. Youth is the future of the South Africa. So according to our chairperson's the question, I want to share in 3 points. The first one, so how to benefit our youth? I think this is the big question, but for us, we would like to use the leadership. So to transfer, because the Prof is the leadership, to transfer this leadership skill to our youth is very important. So 10 days ago, we collaborated with the NYDA. So we do some collaboration. And next month, we will do some collaboration to transfer this leadership to youth. Why we call it youth? Youth means what? Youth means you need to learn. You need to get the experience. If you would like to become the minister, the mayor, the premier, the MEC, maybe in the future for the president, you need to learn how. If you want to start your own company, you have to learn how to get money, how to manage your company, and how to do the sustainable way. So the leadership is very important. I do not want to take a long time. So this is the first one. Second one is the entrepreneurship. So for our youth, 10 days ago, we collaborated with your association, NYDA. We collaborated with China to do the e-business training, live streaming training, and also short video training. So we would like to bring this 5G, this big data, this 4IR technology to our South Africa. So for our youth, for our women, so where is our African technology for IR? AI, robotics, IoT, satellite. So where is our technology? We would like to bring this technology, this training to our youth, to train them to open their own business. Of course, I know some youth, they have done very good business. So we just want to do a little bit more for the youth to get more opportunity and to open the market in the future. This is the next one I want to share. Let me do it quickly. The last one. So 1 month ago, we were doing the door-to-door election. So for the kids from the grade 1 to grade 7, grade 11, they want to learn AI. So technology. So to transfer this technology to our youth that young are very important. So, you know, from their eyes, I can see. I'm a Limpopo boy, I'm a Wenda. So I went to Wenda, I want to benefit my village there, Hamasia. But we went to another village, it's Uwani, is a village. The kids came to me because they looked at me, this is Chinese. I'm South African, this Chinese. They touch my hair, they want to learn AI. So I used my phone, I opened the TikTok, I showed them the AI, the robotics. They were happy. But I promise next time if I go to your school, so I will bring the expert to teach you the AI. I don't want to take more time. Let me stop here. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. I just want to share how to benefit our youth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We had a second speaker, the lady in the grey dress.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Labarang Tabakale, certainly not from Skimsam. For South Africans, you guys know what I'm talking about. I must say, I'm very, very privileged to be here. Prof, we were at Midrand on Saturday, and I really enjoyed your lecture. And I literally heard the director say now that we must only ask questions relating to the event. And so I shall be a student today and listen. So The word for the day really on Saturday was around scrambling, scrambling, and scrambling. I had to really Google what that meant just to contextualize a little bit of it. So today I'm really here just to unscramble a couple of things that Prof has spoken about. And I do have a couple of questions. Please do allow me, moderator. So 2 questions are around, 1, reputational risk from a country perspective, and people, talent, or what I would call economic risk from a country perspective. So, Prof, you mentioned that we require the need to secure our natural resources and markets in South Africa. You also further mentioned that for us to curb illicit financial flow of funds, we need to make sure that we have adequate developed policies and to obviously curb corruption. Now, speaking of corruption in South Africa, obviously, it's not unique to South Africa alone. I suppose then, in the broader Africa region, you would be talking about corruption as well. So my question here around reputational risk, if we really want to change the narrative about Africa, South Africa, Africa as a whole from a reputational perspective, how do we curb financial crime? I mean, we spoke about illicit money flows. How do we make sure that we get our way in the market by being as reputable as possible so that we can get back to the market and be able to, be the best market producers out there? The second one around people, talent, or economic risk. Being here, being students, having a lot of students here, I've seen a lot of students actually going outside the country. We are losing skills, we are losing talent. You mentioned that in order for us to have the best skills, we have to have the best economy as well. How do we sustain that, Prof? What is it that we do? I mean, we've got skilled people, but rather there is a huge African diaspora that we're seeing across the continent itself. And those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We had 2 additional questions. The lady in the black dress was the 3rd speaker. All right. Okay, no, it's fine. I think you can go and then we'll close off with the last speaker and then hand it back to... And look, yes, in as much as, some of the responses we'll give back to the Prof, but, where we are in a process of co-creating and constructing solutions that are unique to young people, I would then also give the 2 panel members just to have a bite on what their thought processes are in relation to the comments and the questions that have been raised. So, lady in the black.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gugulethu Letimpilo Mtshali, and I'm the founder of Echoes of 76, the youth of 1976 reincarnated. And I was at the lecture, and I absolutely loved it because it made me sure that what we are doing as young people is right. Young people that are trying to find our generational struggle and find ways to, tackle it. My one question is, how do we then make sure that we're speaking the same language as people who have been through the struggle? For example, in South Africa, we know that we have leaders who have lived through apartheid and they've seen everything from when it was going on until democracy. How do we then make sure that we're speaking the same language? Because I think what they say here in South Africa is that it's Ngama 2000. So that's the narrative that they have, that we do not understand the struggle and we don't know what to do. So how do we then make sure that when we go into a room with people like yourself, Prof, we're speaking a language that you understand? What is it that you think our generation needs to change in order to speak the same language as you? Thank you.
Thank you to our 2K. The last speaker.
Hi, my name is Sophie Maseko, and my bullet points are actually for all the speakers in the panels on the stage above. So based on our Prof, he's given us a good narrative of African history in itself. Based on your guys' programs, how have you guys been used as individuals to actually preserve our history so we do not repeat it or repeat certain mistakes that occurred? And another thing is mentorship. Mentorship is very vital. However, mentorship comes at a cost. But my question is, we have platforms like this, we have net forums like this. However, it doesn't just stop here. It has to continue. How do you guys carry on that kind of mentorship? From example, you spoke about the townships. Okay, great. We're penetrating the townships. You've got Bonang Mokhale, you've got McLean Sibanda, who have brought different technological programs into the townships. He's even started Ikasi laboratories. My question is also to NYDA is, how are you guys infiltrating townships so that they can see, like, listen, this person's IT, this little person is got computer literacy. Another thing is exposure to other countries and the sense of Ubuntu. A sense of Ubuntu has been lost. It's either the strongest one survives or the weakest one dies. And my question is, you, especially also to you, Prof, you guys had this sense of strength of Ubuntu. We get Nguki wa Thiong'o writing, Decolonizing the Mind, where he speaks about the privilege of learning our mother tongue, the privilege of learning our indigenous knowledge. And however, when it's brought into something like a space of corporate, it's seen as, or shunned as, oh, it's not valuable. Your natural hair, our skin complexions. How do we preserve that, and how do we keep that kind of light of Africa can be one of the strongest continents together if we work together? So how do we keep that kind of unity or bring it back into our society as we face today?
Thank you very much. Thank you to our audience for those profound comments and questions. Let me hand back then to our panel members who will attempt then just to give their insights on the questions that have been raised. Let me start on my far right, and then it will be followed by Karabo, and then Prof will be the last speaker to respond. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I'll firstly respond to the last question on how do we keep the unity, the spirit of Ubuntu. So I think the first thing that we need to understand as Africans broadly is that Africa is one, and Africa can never be separated. The bleeding DRC is a bleeding South Africa. A bleeding South Sudan is a bleeding South Africa. You know, a bleeding Malawi is a bleeding South Africa. So the first thing is the sense of patriotism first. The sense of patriotism needs to continue to be embedded, not only, you know, with those people that have been in the struggle before, but even with the new generations that are being brought into the space. And on the issue of mentorship, we firstly need to get rid of the divide that is there between those in decision-making powers and young people. Young people have ideas, clear, proper, and all those ideas can guarantee economic growth, economic effectivity. You see, even with the skill set that we lose, with a large number of South African young people going to China, that on itself speaks on the ability of young people that they have. So if we can bridge the divide between young people and those in decision-making, issues of mentorship, issues of unemployment, those can easily be addressed, because even in the technological space, young people are making money, they have business using AI, but the government is not aware. If they're aware, then maybe priorities are on another, you know, other things. So the issue is to break the divide, and also the regard of researchers as well. Young people are on the space of the internet, they research, they have solutions. Research should not only be on the space of academics. This is why, you know, even on the case of the HSRC, we have public community engagement. This is to ensure that even with the research that is put out there, is not only appealing, you know, to us as academics or researchers, but research that advocates and fosters the voices of the people that are, you know, lived experiences. Because the idea of research is to foster development. And we cannot disregard even the idea of research, you know, embedded on outputs. So that should be something that universities themselves get rid of. Even, you know, universities fostering, you know, research output, but disregarding the need for that research to change communities. We cannot only, you know, be running to have the university ranked 16 because it had 10 journal articles or 50 dissertations. question is, what is the quality of those dissertations? What is the quality of those articles? And do they trickle down to somebody living in Soweto? Do they trickle down to somebody living in Mamelodi? Thank you.
All right, thanks. No, let me hand to Karabo.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to attempt answering 2000. So, Lewahang. Is it Guguletu? Okay, sorry about that, Gugu. So I'm going to attempt answering a question about how do we speak the same language. In 2018, I had to represent South Africa at the African Union. And one of our topics was about this, that how us as young people on the African continent, how can we come together to fight some of the struggles that we are facing? Because you mentioned something that was quite important, and we mentioned it also when we were presenting this thing, that we understand what our former leaders fought for. They had one mission and one goal, like Baba Prof has said. But their mission and their goal was for that time, and it was relevant for those times. 30 years later, our struggles are totally different. We are not fighting to be able to walk in town without a dumpers. We are fighting for employment. We are not fighting today to be recognized as a human being, as a black South African, but we are fighting the fact that almost every 3 days or 2 days a woman is killed by a man. Our struggles are different. So as young people today, we need to find a voice that is speaking of oneness. And one of the things that we mentioned and we concluded on is going back to what Baba Prof said, economic freedom. That if we are able to put it as the head and interlink it to all these things that are affecting us, we'll see how we'll be able to come out with one voice. Without the economic freedom, there are no jobs. Without the economic freedom, our African education will not be out there. Without our economic freedom, we won't be able to stop corruption at the level that it's at. Because right now we are having leaders who are saying, as long as I'm benefiting, then I'm okay with it. Without that economic freedom as Africans, a lot of things will not be able to actually go forth, and we won't be able to grow. So as young people today, to answer that personally, and based on some of the educational things that I might have went through and read on, if we could put the economic freedom as the fourth thing and as our head and interlink it to all these other factors that are affecting it, we'll be able to come out with one voice and we'll be able to know what to fight for. We'll have one mission and one vision. It does not have to be aligned in totality, meaning we don't have to agree to everything. I might be corrected, but I don't think even then you agreed on everything. But because you had a mission, because the picture was bigger than what we thought or what you thought, you fought. So for us as young people today, that is what I would say we need to fight for. Having that economic freedom based on all these other aspects. And also, what does our generation need to do? I'm going to base this on two factors, right? One, I believe that as young people, we need to educate ourselves. Not going to school is not an option. But I'm not even speaking of the streamlined education. Read on your own. Look into history. Look into the systems that have been implemented even from other continents and see that how can that strategically work for our continent. Just because they wronged us, it does not necessarily mean some of the things we can't learn from them. And I've always said that. So learn, read, and that's how we'll be able to educate ourselves. But also one thing that is very important, especially for us as young people, let us normalize going back to our elders and asking for wisdom. There is a saying that I was told, I nearly said when I was very young, but when I was younger, that there is nothing that's new under the sun. There is nothing that we can ever face that was not actually faced prior to these times. So it is not wrong of us to go back to our elders and say, we don't understand, may you please guide us. As young people, if there is one thing that we need to learn to do, is the importance of asking for guidance. That is important. We cannot do this thing alone. we need it. And I believe if we can get to that point of saying we are going back to our elders, we ask for wisdom, we come to our mama and our baba prof and say that how can we work around this? In spite of their times being different from ours, there are certain things that we can learn from them that we can still use today so that we can be able to have that one voice and overcome the fight or the struggles that we are facing currently.
All right, thank you. Now, Prof, and to our audience, we have been alerted that we are running out of time. So we will request that as you respond, you also give your closing remarks. But before you do that, I would like to be a little mischievous a bit. Now, Prof, on Saturday, in your keynote, you asked a fundamental question. What is to be done, right? Now, you had referenced the dreams of the founding fathers and mothers of the Organization of African Unity, who had once created that continental organization whose dreams have to be investigated again and revisited. And you also called it upon us who were listening to reflect on how to make that come true. So I want to pose it back to you, Prof. What is to be done? How do we, as young people who have inherited an organization of this nature, what ought to be done for young people in this country, in Africa, so that the ideals of the founding mothers and fathers of the African unity can live and continue living for generations to come? Thank you, Prof.
I think it is important to have constant intergenerational dialogue under any circumstances, because the risk would be to feel that young people alone, without taking into account the experience of older generation, can go on their own. The risk to try to reinvent the wheel will be a trap which has to be avoided. Because in the Wolof language they said that an old woman or an old man is always necessary in the house, you know, to give the experience. Because we cannot start from scratch. So we must not throw stones at older generations. This would be a risk to say that everything which was down before us is wrong, is rotten, is bad. No. We should be humble enough to draw the lessons from what those who have preceded us have done and to acknowledge their contribution. Learn from their mistakes, but also from their achievements. So a sense of humility is necessary. When I think of my conversations 40, 50 years ago at Dar es Salaam University, different spaces in Africa, meeting with comrades who were in exile. The conditions in which they used to work, or the stories they have to account for, their parents, their relatives remaining at home were involved in during the apartheid era. You will see that there was a lot of risk past generations have taken for this country to be liberated. So you have to say, to pay respect to what has been done, so that we are in this situation we are in today. Of course, as you rightly said, problems, the forms of problems, the content of the problems may change. However, if we are today to ask for more housing, more electricity, more clean water, you compare from what we started, you will see that there is something has been done. So a sense of humility is necessary. And it is not those who advocated for the perpetuation of the, for instance, of the colonial system or the apartheid system who will come to give us lessons today about what to do. So I think this is very important. This is why I say young people has to work with older generation to transmit not only the knowledge but also the experience. Because being young is not a permanent situation. It's a transitory situation.
Tell that from 20. We were young too once. That's true.
So we used to say in our young age, be expert, be red meaning but committed, because we had the red flag. I said, some of us would say, Chairman Mao said, be, committed. But also be experts in your field. If you are a medical doctor, you should do everything to be a competent medical doctor, a competent engineer who will constantly improve his or her knowledge of the subject, to be able to provide for better health care, not at general level, but also even at individual level. But when you deal with the patient who is before you, sitting before you, what do you do to say, I have a moral satisfaction of having been able to provide a good treatment for this man or this woman, this girl or this boy who is in front of me as a medical doctor. To build a bridge, thinking of, I'm building this bridge today, but I want, if somebody come 20 years back, you will see that so-and-so was the engineer who participated in the building of this bridge, and he has done a good job. With a patriotic vision, with the Ubuntu vision. So I think this is very, very important. The issue of corruption, of course, this is something which is rampant corruption in most of our societies, and even beyond our societies. While elsewhere, corruption has, not less effect, but is less effective in terms of ruining the economic system, because there are safeguards in society. You have vibrant civil societies, you have a vibrant press, which unveil all these acts of corruption. And society mobilize against it. Those who conduct corruptive actions are dealt with, and through a judicial process which is considered as fair for society. So I think these are some of the issues. And of course, the issue of language, I think it is important. To speak the same, you don't have to speak necessarily the same language, but you have to try to understand each other, one another. This is very important, because at the age of the social media, it's something different. I used to read the bulletin of the ANC and different movement in the struggle some 50 years back. I still have numerous copies of Seshaba and all these movement groups, journals, and or leaflets which were spread, which only can reach a few people. But today, when we talk of a language, you can, through your handset, you can speak with thousands of people, address millions of people in one day. So the conditions of the language and the interactions have changed. We have to adapt also to this. So just to summarize, stop there. I think it is important today for young people to be more involved in societal issues, to be mobilized for the cause of the continent, for the cause of the people, for the cause of unity. We have to break this colonial pattern of relationship, because it is an issue of securing our identity as human beings, our identity as Africans in the world today. We are among the peoples who have most suffered in the last 400 history of mankind. We have to reverse this tendency. It can be done only, not through only the mobilization of the leadership, but of millions of Africans. Most importantly, young people who are the driving force for this new kind of call for duty. This is what I have really to say, and really I'm very, very pleased that the spirit of liberation is still here. It's need to be rekindled, and I call upon young people from South Africa, but other young people from Africa need you to be part of this continental movement. There is a need for more exchange between students from different universities, from young people from different civil society organizations, from political parties, to come together to exchange experience. And I think this is much needed today to make Africa a land, much better, a land of hope, a land of progress. I think this is what is most needed today. I call on you, because you can do much. Your country is a big country. It's a country which has a lot of resources. If South Africa is even more mobilized, the transformation we are calling for are carried further in this country. It can have undoubtedly a tremendous impact on the history of Africa as it is being shaped now. For us as older generation, what we want is you, young people, to take your destiny in your hands, to reshape the history of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we give Prof a warm round of applause? Shoo. Yeah. You know, Prof, I think I also deserve one of you parting words, but my time has come to an end. But I really would like to extend our appreciation to the panel members, particularly to Prof. I think, you know, there's a saying, and I'm Xhosa and Xhosa. So you know, there's a saying that says, "Indlela ibuzwa kwabaphambili." The road is, loosely translated, the road is asked from those who've traversed the journey that we are currently on. And so I couldn't echo the sentiments around the need for creating these intergenerational conversations. Because what that does is that it allows young people who are a group who are a numerical majority, but unfortunately, when we are speaking about the various corridors of power and influence, they are nowhere to be seen. And so I think I can confidently speak on behalf of the foundation, UNISA, that will continue creating these safe spaces for young people to be able to impart, you know, their views, their aspirations, but more than just lamenting about the various challenges, would be young people to constructively co-create the solutions that would ultimately alleviate the material conditions that young people find themselves in. Now, there's a saying, and I will borrow from your words, Prof, but equally, you would have borrowed from Kwame Nkrumah when he said, "Create first, seek first the political kingdom, and everything else will be added onto it." Now, there's another saying in isiXhosa that goes, "Singabantwana bomgquba." We, loosely translated, we are the sons and daughters of compost. But what that means is that having an appreciation of a dark history that we are faced with, we are the sons and daughters that have inherited a legacy that predates ourselves, a legacy that spans as far back as 1652. And even before that, but it then becomes the responsibility of young people in this country particularly to be able to protect the gains that have been made by our democratic government over the last 30 years. Now, it's notwithstanding that, you know, there are shortcomings and challenges that exist, but it is something that as a young person, we can't go back to a time when a person of my color, or a person of my race, or a person of my gender, or a person of my class status in society would not be afforded the basic human rights that a different person who was of a different color, who was of a different gender, was able to be afforded. And so it's important then for us to also have an appreciation that young people should occupy the corridors of power. Now, it was so opportune that this particular discussion happens on the eve of elections, because as you correctly stated, Prof, youth ought to be the driving force for change. And I can confidently say that, in fact, as we were deliberating, I just received my certificate from the IEC. I have raised my hand as a young candidate to go to Parliament, the National Assembly, so that we are then able to say that young people are represented in those corridors. When the necessary legislation is enacted, that it will be done so with the view that no young person should be left behind. When we are holding the executive to account, which is the departments and you know, we are able to do so with the view and the appreciation that indeed the gains will not be lost, and indeed youth still have a pivotal role to play in the polity of this country. And so my parting shots would really be that to every young person, let's not lose this opportunity. Let's go out on the 29th, let's vote correctly, and really let's ensure that the blood that was sacrificed by our forebears for the liberation and for the democracy that we are benefiting does not go in vain. With that, once again, thank you to our panel members, thank you to yourselves for really being an engaging audience. I think we would have had quite a productive discussion. And as I already stated, my very difficult job has come to an end. Thank you very much for also affording us your ears. And with that, we will hand back over to the program director, who will outline the program going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Asanda, and a warm round of, applause for her again for steering this ship. You did very well. Can I release you? And then let's have the Prof remain in there. Thank you very much. Well done.
And the other panelists too.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to repeat, copy, reiterate, or anything like that. We need to round off. Just to also thank Bongani, you impressed me when you talked about the idea that DRC, a bleeding DRC, is a bleeding South Africa. And then to Karabo, your emphasis on the need for economic emancipation and the need to deal with the contemporary struggles that the youth are faced with. Those are my real take out. So now I'm going to invite Professor Mello and Prof. Nkomo to hand out something, to the Professor Bathily, and thereafter Professor Mello will close for us. He's got a lot to say about what happened. Thank you so much.
I think we need a woman up here. Who's going to join us?
Maybe she should do that one.
Come along. Wait, one more.
One more woman. Yes.
Maybe she can come closer. Yeah.
No,
she's
not
too
on
far.
one side.
Oh, okay. This is a
Now
gift
that's
for me.
beautiful.
For sake of transparency, this is not a brown envelope. You will see.
Thank you, Prof. We really appreciate you coming. You've been with us, I won't say for an old man like you, I'll say that for a person who has contributed so much to Africa, you've done so much for us. At UNISA, we're really appreciative. You were with us almost for the entire week since last week. You met with our Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lengabula. You spoke at the round table at the Thabo Mbeki African School. You delivered the lecture on Saturday. And here you are on Monday, late afternoon. We don't take this lightly, Prof.
I enjoyed it, really, with my colleagues. I learned a lot from the older and the younger generation.
Oh, thank you. You see, I'm young, Professor.
Including all the contributors at these participants, the panelists, and of course the able director of program, and also the Madam Moderator. I really appreciate, good director. David, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Chairperson, thank you very much. This event is actually a culmination of the relationship between two institutions. UNISA, and the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. And I'm also talking on behalf of the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs. We are actually the implementing agent. And I must start by thanking the top management of this institution for allowing us to use the facilities which are the resources, for allowing us to use the money to get Prof. Bathily from Senegal to be here, and all that comes with it. Most importantly, let me also thank him for leaving his family back home to come and be with us here, to share the wisdom. And I think a takeaway message for all of us is that as the youth, we can be the change that we want to see. And that is what Mahatma Gandhi once said. But most importantly, if an enabling environment is created for us. And therefore, let me also thank the program director, who is my colleague in the school, the moderator, the young and very able chairperson of the NYDA, the speakers. You have also been very wonderful in terms of the inputs that we have made. And I think beyond where we are, it is for us all to say, what difference can I make in my own life? And what difference can I make for the country, for my neighbor, for my neighborhood as well? And therefore it implies that all of us collectively, we have a responsibility. The most important message that I also have is that we have also prepared some food there. Please do not go away without enjoying the food. Thank you so much.
Colleagues, that's it. Thank you so much.